Chapter 1, the email. You got the email. Maybe it was a call. Maybe it was some clean corporate sentence that sounded like it had been through 7 lawyers and at least 3 PR people before it even reached your inbox. You're out. Now you're sitting at your house, married, kids, expensive life. The badge is gone. The calendar's quiet. The severance is coming. And the Meta stock is still sitting there like the last piece of the old life that you did not leave. And the strange part is you may not be broke. You may not even be close to broke. And that's what makes this moment so weird. Because if you were broke, the problem would be obvious. You would need income. You would need work. You would need cash. But when you're financially independent-ish, the problem gets more complicated. And you may have enough money to avoid panic, but not enough clarity to be careless. And you may have cash, severance, RSUs, and Meta stock. You may have a spouse trying to be supportive, and you may have kids who still need you to be steady. And somehow, even with all of that, something still does not feel completely settled. And maybe part of you feels guilty for even being shaken by this, because from the outside looking in, people might say, you'll be fine. But being fine on paper and feeling steady in your own house are not one and the same. And that's normal, because this is not just a layoff. This is a liquidity decision, a tax decision, a healthcare decision, a concentrated stock decision, a marriage conversation, a parenting conversation, and maybe, if we're being completely real, an identity conversation. And nothing in this video is a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold Meta stock. And I'm not here to predict the stock price. I'm just here to help you slow the decision down before the stock becomes the whole conversation. Because one of the risks right now is making a major financial decision while you're still emotionally reacting to the layoff. Chapter 2, the stock is not the first question. The stock is not the first question. That is where I would start. Because after a layoff, the stock gets loud. Should I sell? Should I hold? What if Meta goes up a lot? What if it goes down a lot? What if I regret selling? What if I regret not selling? All very fair questions, but if you were my friend, I would not let you start there. I would ask one question first. How long can your household live without another paycheck? Not your net worth, not your confidence, not the version you tell yourself when you want to feel okay. Your actual household. Mortgage, rent, kids, food, healthcare, taxes, school, travel, insurance, everything that keeps showing up whether Meta employs you or not. Because in New York or wherever you may be living, a big number can get small fast. And when you have a spouse and kids, runway is just not math. It is whether the house feels calm. It is whether your spouse is looking at the same numbers that you are. And maybe the hardest question is not the one you ask yourself. Maybe it is the one your spouse asks after the kids go to bed. So what's the plan? That is the question I would want you to be ready to answer. Not perfectly, honestly. So before you decide what to do with your Meta stock, answer the question that comes first. How many months do we actually have? 3 months is one conversation. 12 months is a completely different conversation. 18 months with healthcare covered is a completely different animal in itself. But you need to know which conversation you're actually in right now. And the stock decision comes after the runway, not before. Because at some point, this stops being a stock question and it becomes a kitchen table question. Chapter 3, severance is time. Severance is not money. It is time, or at least that's how I would want you to think about it, because a severance payment can hit the account and feel like relief. And when your stress can disguise itself as an actual plan, and you might feel like you deserve a trip. You might feel like the family needs a complete reset. You might feel like after years of working super hard, you finally have permission to actually breathe. And maybe you do, but severance is not a bonus. It is a bridge. And the thing about a bridge, it does not matter how impressive it looks if it does not get you to the other side of the bridge. So the question is not, is this severance good? The question you need to ask yourself is, what does the severance need to do? Does it cover taxes? Does it cover healthcare? Does it cover your normal spending habits? Does it cover part of even 2027? And does it give you the time to think, or does it slowly leak through the same lifestyle that was built around a much larger compensation package. Because at Meta, your life may not have been built on salary alone. It may have been salary, bonus, RSUs, refreshers, benefits, and the quiet confidence that more income was coming. The last part matters. When you're a high earner and you are just used to income, you are used to the certainty of the next deposit coming in. When that certainty completely disappears, even a strong balance sheet can start to feel a little shaky. So treat the severance like a bridge, not a celebration, not a trophy, not a consolation prize, but a bridge. And bridges are for crossing. Chapter 4. The boring details can change the plan. The boring details may be the details that change everything. Healthcare, COBRA, taxes, benefit deadlines, the parts nobody really wants to read or until they become expensive. But if you are married with children, these are not footnotes. They are runway. And if healthcare is covered for a period of time, your monthly burn may be a lot lower. And if it's not, your runway might be even shorter. If your taxes are higher than expected, the severance may not stretch as far. If 2026 still includes salary, bonus, RSU income, PTO payout, severance, spouse income, investment income, or possible stock sales, then 2026 may not be a low income year just because the job ended. That needs to be modeled. And 2027 may look completely different. You don't have to jump into another whole W-2 role. 2027 could become a lower income planning window for you. Not a loophole, not any magic, not some internet tax hack, but a planning window. And it may be worth reviewing capital gains during that time. Maybe losses, maybe Roth conversion planning opportunities, maybe healthcare coordination, maybe rebuilding the portfolio around the next chapter instead of the old one. Maybe none of it makes sense at all. Maybe some of it does. I don't know. But the point is, it may be worth looking with the right professionals, because when income changes, planning is also going to present opportunities that also may change. And if you spent years in a high income tech compensation, a lower income year may be rare. But none of this works if you're just doing guesswork. And that is exactly why the boring details matter. Who is covered? For how long? What did you pay? What tax bill could be coming? What forms do you need to fill out? And what deadlines actually matter to you and your family? What happens is if you start doing some consulting or you get another job, and that's not going to be glamorous, but the part that might keep you from making a rushed stock decision because you forgot how expensive life gets when benefits start to change. So reducing that pressure, that is the point, because pressure can make a thoughtful person rush to a conclusion, and pressure can make a financially independent person act like they have no options at all. And we are attempting to create a thinking room, and that is completely it. Chapter 5. The job left, the stock stayed. The job left and the stock stayed. That is the strange part. And it leads to the real question. Is this really about Meta stock or about how much of your old life you are still tied to? Because your income was Meta. Your benefits were also Meta. Your RSUs, Meta. Your future refreshers may have also been Meta. Your routine was Meta. Your identity may also be Meta. And now the job is completely gone, but the stock is still there. So in a way, your old employer is still in the house. Not physically, but financially. And this does not mean Meta is bad. It does not mean sell. It does not mean hold. It means look at it honestly, because there is a difference between owning Meta stock intentionally and owning it because the shares vested and nobody ever forced you to finally make a decision. One is a plan, the other is inertia. After a layoff, inertia can create risks you may not have intended to end up taking. So ask yourself this: how much of my family's future is still tied to this one company? And maybe more importantly, ask yourself, would I choose that today? Because you do not need to make your old employer the center of your next chapter. And that line really matters. And you do not need to make your old employer the center of what your next chapter may be. Chapter 6. The cash test. If Meta had paid you cash instead of stock, your family buy this much Meta stock today? The question cuts through a lot, because once RSUs vest, they are not some side thing. They are a part of your overall net worth. And if you keep holding on to them, you are making an investment decision, even if you do nothing, especially if you do nothing. So ask it plainly. If this money were cash today, would we buy this much Meta? Would my spouse agree or disagree? Would we put this percentage of our family's life into one company? Would we do it while unemployed? Would we do it while taking into consideration that we're taking 2027 off? And would we do it with kids, what our expenses are, and no guaranteed next paycheck? Those questions are not meant to scare you in any sort of way. They are meant to separate habit from intention, because RSUs can feel like stock you received and cash feels like money you choose to invest. But once RSUs vest, holding it is still a choice, and doing nothing is also a choice. Sometimes doing nothing feels responsible because it is quiet. But quiet does not always mean intentional. A lot of concentration happens by accident. Shares vest, you hold, more shares vest, you hold, the stock moves, you keep working, the account's growing. Then one day the job ends and the position's still there, carrying more weight than you meant it to give it. And that is not a failure by any means. That is how compensation can quietly become concentration. But now you know, and once you know the position deserves a review, there are two emotional traps to watch out for. Selling because you are hurt, holding because you are attached. Both are human, neither is a plan, and your portfolio does not need revenge. And it does not need loyalty. It needs a job. So ask yourself, would I be selling because this fits the household plan or because I am angry? Would I be holding this because it fits the household plan or because it feels like a piece of who I was? Meta may still be a great company. That does not mean it has to remain the biggest bet in your personal life. The goal is not to punish Meta by selling it. The goal is to prove loyalty by holding. That's not the goal either. The goal is to make a decision you are aligned with your family, your time, and what your next chapter is going to be. That is the scoreboard now. Chapter 7, 2027. Taking 2027 off is not automatically irresponsible. Taking it off without knowing your numbers may create some risks you did not intend to take. And that is the distinction. Maybe you should start to take some time for yourself. Maybe you should stop sprinting like you have been. Maybe your kids are at an age where you want to be around them more when it matters. And maybe your spouse has watched you run for long enough. And maybe you want to build something. Maybe you want to stop measuring your life by what your total compensation is. That may be completely valid, but let's not romanticize it before we model it. Taking 2027 off sounds peaceful when it lives in your head. It has to stay peaceful when it hits the household. The idea has to survive daylight. It has to survive a spreadsheet. It has to survive the spouse conversation. It has to survive a bad market month. It has to survive the possibility that you do not want to go back when the year is over. So ask yourself, would my spouse feel included in this plan? Would they see that the same runway that I see? Would this feel something like we decided together or something I'm quietly convincing myself that it's okay? Would the house feel calm? Would I be present with my kids? Or would I be physically home, but mentally calculating every situation in the afternoon? And that is the difference between taking time off and taking stress home. Time off from strength can be meaningful. Time off without a clear plan can create costs you may not have expected. And you do not want to discover which one it was 6 months too late. Chapter 8, the framework and the last question. This is why I built the liquidity framework, not because a PDF can solve your life. It can't. But because this decision has too many moving pieces to leave floating around in your head. Cash, severance, healthcare, taxes, kids, expenses, spouse, RSUs, position size, cost basis, concentrated stock, blah, blah, blah. Whether 27 is even realistic, nobody even knows their clearest decisions with all that bouncing around mentally. And that is how fear speaks in. And that is how stress starts to sneak in. And that is exactly how overconfidence could also sneak in. And that is how even a thoughtful person can make a rushed decision and a mistake with their strategy. And the framework does not tell you exactly what to buy. It does not tell you what to sell. It is not a personalized investment tax or legal advice, and it's not a replacement for working with a qualified professional. The framework is not there to create certainty. It is there to help you create order. And it is simply a way to slow the decision down and organize the facts for yourself. And one of the options inside the tool is for a concentrated stock position. So if your issue is Meta stock from RSUs, you can choose that. And you do not need to know everything. You just need to know your approximate position size and what your cost basis is and answer a few questions about your overall structure. And that is completely it. It gives you a PDF completely free, and you do not need to enter an email. So there's no gate, no pressure, no sales call required. Because the first step is not to be sold. The first step is to turn the lights on, and the framework is not there to make the decision for you. It is there to help you see what decision you are actually making. And if this helps one person slow down before making a meaningful decision with company stock after a layoff, then it did what it was supposed to do. So the real question is not this, should I sell Meta? The real question is, what do I want my next chapter to depend on? Because your last chapter may have depended on Meta, the paycheck, the benefits, the RSUs, the calendar, the identity, but your next chapter does not have to be built in that way. And maybe this is the first time in a long time where you get to ask yourself, what do you actually want your next chapter to look like? Meta may have been the old scoreboard. It does not have to be the next one. Maybe you keep some Meta, maybe you look in different options, and maybe you take all of 2027 off. Maybe you don't do any of this. Maybe you consult, maybe you build, maybe you go back faster than you thought. There is really no real universal answer, but there is a better process. Start with liquidity, start with the household, and start with what your runway is, and start having a conversation with your spouse. Then ask yourself, how much flexibility do we actually have? And then after that, how much concentrated stock risk can our plan support? Because you may not be in financial danger, but you are in a financial transition, and those are not the same thing. The company chapter may be over. The family chapter is not. Plan for that one. This content is for informational and educational purposes only. It is not personalized investment advice, tax advice, legal advice, or a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold Meta or any security. 369 Financial is not affiliated with Meta Platforms Incorporated. Please review your own severance documents, equity agreements, tax situation, and benefits materials, and consult with a qualified financial, tax, and legal professional before making any decisions based on your individual circumstances.